In the beginning, before cities rose and nations were named, the earth was silent, untouched by war, unstained by blood. It was a world new and pure, where the wind carried the whispers of angels and every dawn felt like a divine promise. But even in that perfect stillness, a shadow was waiting to emerge, the first spark of envy, the first test of the human heart. From which country are you watching this story? Tell us in the comments and subscribe if you love the stories that remind us of Allah's wisdom and power. Adam and Hawa lived as the first of mankind, learning to grow, build, and worship under Allah's guidance. Their children grew in pairs, twins born together in harmony, each carrying the light of their parents' faith. Among them were two brothers who could not have been more different, Habil, the shepherd, and Qabil, the farmer. Habil's life was simple, peaceful, devoted to caring for his flock. He looked at the heavens with gratitude and spoke to Allah through his humility. Qabil, however, was different. His heart burned with ambition. He loved the strength in his hands, the feel of the soil, and the pride that came from his labor. But pride has a way of planting seeds deeper than we realize. For within Qabil's heart was something he could not name yet, a subtle unease whenever his brother's eyes reflected peace. As the years passed, the children of Adam were commanded to marry in a way that preserved balance and purity. Each son would marry a sister born from another twin birth. It was a rule of divine wisdom, designed by Allah himself. But when Adam announced the decree, Qabil's world shifted. The woman chosen for Habil was one of striking beauty, her presence serene and pure, like the light of the early dawn. She was not meant to be his, yet Qabil's heart twisted with desire and defiance. The thought consumed him until he could no longer see reason. How could this be fair, he thought. Why should my brother receive what my heart longs for? And that single question, whispered in bitterness, became the beginning of mankind's first rebellion. The woman herself was innocent in all of this. She did not seek to divide, nor to inflame the hearts of men. Yet her existence became a mirror in which both brothers revealed the truth within themselves. For Habil saw Allah's decree and submitted with peace, but Qabil saw the same decree and let it poison him. Love without obedience becomes obsession, and desire without trust turns into corruption. This was not merely about marriage, it was about the test of faith, the measure of surrender to the will of the Creator. Adam, sensing the tension growing between his sons, commanded them to offer a sacrifice to Allah. It would be the sign of whose heart was pure and whom Allah accepted. Each brother was to bring an offering that reflected his work and his sincerity. Habil went to his flock, searching for his best sheep, the healthiest, the most perfect. He chose it not because it was easy to part with, but because he loved Allah more than he loved his possessions. With his heart bowed in submission, he placed it upon the altar and whispered his intention with full trust in his Lord. Qabil, however, looked at his harvest with contempt. His pride would not allow him to part with the best of his crops. Instead, he gathered the worst, the leftovers, the withered pieces, the offerings he would never eat himself. His hands gave, but his heart withheld. And so he placed them upon his altar, not out of devotion, but defiance, daring Allah to accept them. When the moment came, the two offerings stood before the heavens. A fire descended, a divine sign that Allah had accepted one of them. Flames consumed Habil's sacrifice, rising with the light of acceptance, while Qabil's lay cold and untouched. In that instant, silence filled the air. Qabil's pride shattered, his face hardened, his heart, already cracked by envy, now burst open with rage. He stared at his brother with a gaze that burned hotter than the fire that had just descended. But instead of looking inward for his fault, he blamed Habil. He could not bear the thought that Allah favored someone who was humble over someone who was strong. And so began the darkest thoughts in the heart of mankind, the whisper that if I cannot have what you have, then I must destroy you to find peace. The days that followed were heavy and tense, and silence hung between the two brothers like a storm waiting to break. Qabil could not look at Habil without feeling that burning pain of rejection, that ache of humiliation, that gnawed at his pride. Each night, as he lay awake under the sky, he replayed the moment the fire descended and consumed his brother's offering. It was not just the sight of the flames, it was the meaning behind them. Allah had accepted Habil and turned away from him. The heavens had chosen, and Qabil could not bear it. His envy festered like poison in his chest, twisting every thought, every feeling. It whispered that his brother had stolen what was rightfully his. It told him that Habil was the obstacle, the reason his life felt so small. And when the heart burns with envy, even truth becomes unbearable. In those sleepless nights, Shaitan found his way to Qabil's heart. He came not as a monster of fire, but as a whisper, soft, persuasive, deadly. Your father favors him, Shaitan murmured. Even Allah prefers him. You will always be the second son, the forgotten one. Qabil clenched his fists and tried to silence the voice, but it kept returning, feeding his anger until it became his only companion. Shaitan does not force, he suggests. He plants the seed and lets man water it with his own emotions. And Qabil, who had once been a man of strength and skill, began to crumble under the weight of his own pride. He looked at Habil and saw not a brother, but a rival. He looked at the woman who had once been the cause of his jealousy and saw her as the prize that could heal his wounded ego. The world around him became narrow, filled with shadows and suspicion. Even the sight of his father's wisdom angered him, for Adam could not understand the storm inside his son's heart. One day, Qabil confronted Habil, unable to contain his fury. I will kill you, he said through gritted teeth, for Allah has favored you over me. His words shook the air between them, but Habil stood calm, his eyes soft with sorrow. If you raise your hand to kill me, Habil replied, I will not raise mine against you. I fear Allah, the Lord of all worlds. His voice was steady, not from weakness, but from faith. It was the strength of one who knows that life and death belong only to Allah. But to Qabil, those words felt like another wound. They sounded like pity, like judgment, like mockery. The whisper returned, he thinks he's better than you. And Qabil's heart grew darker still. The day of the crime came quietly, without warning. The sun rose over the hills, and the air was still. Habil had gone to tend his flock as he always did, unaware of what his brother carried inside him. Qabil followed him into the open fields, his mind consumed with rage. Every step he took felt heavier, as though the earth itself resisted his intention. In that moment, creation held its breath, for this would be the first time one human hand would rise against another. No war had ever been fought, no blood had ever been spilled. Even the angels, who had once questioned whether mankind would bring corruption, now watched as prophecy turned to truth. Habil turned when he heard his brother's footsteps, and for a moment their eyes met. It was not hatred that Habil saw, it was pain, confusion, and something deeply broken. My brother, Habil said softly, do not let Shaitan rule over you. Seek Allah's mercy before it is too late. But mercy cannot enter a heart that has closed itself. Qabil struck, his rage consuming him, his mind deaf to every cry of reason. The world fell silent as Habil's body collapsed upon the earth. It was done. The first blood spilled upon the soil, staining it forever with the mark of human sin. The air seemed to mourn. The trees stood still. The sky, once clear and blue, darkened as if the heavens themselves wept for what mankind had become. When Qabil stepped back and looked at what he had done, the fire of his anger vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold emptiness. He had silenced his brother, but peace did not come. Instead, the silence screamed louder than any voice. He stood there trembling, unable to breathe, unable to think. What had he accomplished? The woman he desired would not love a murderer. His father's eyes would never look upon him with pride again. And worst of all, the earth beneath him seemed to reject him, as though it knew what had been done. He tried to move the body, to hide it, but he had never seen death before. He did not understand it. His brother's eyes, once full of life, now stared blankly at the sky, and for the first time, Qabil realized what death truly was, a final silence that cannot be undone. Days passed, and Qabil wandered in despair, unable to face his father, unable to face himself. He carried Habil's body upon his shoulders, not knowing where to put it. The weight grew unbearable, not just the physical burden, but the spiritual one. Each step felt like walking through the fire of regret. His mind was filled with memories of their childhood, of laughter, of prayers shared side by side. And now, that brotherly bond had been severed forever by his own hand. The pain was greater than any punishment he could imagine. He cried out, but the earth gave no answer. He fell to his knees beside the lifeless form, whispering apologies that could never be heard. Then, by the mercy of Allah, a lesson came to him in the form of a crow. 2 crows appeared before Qabil, fighting until one killed the other. He watched as the living crow scratched at the ground, digging into the soil, and then covered the dead, one with dust. It was the first burial on earth, a divine message delivered through one of Allah's simplest creatures. Qabil watched in silence as the truth dawned upon him. "Woe to me," he cried out. "Am I not even capable of being like this crow, to hide the body of my brother?" His voice broke as he began to dig, his hands bleeding, his tears mixing with the soil. When he finally laid Habil to rest, he felt the full weight of what he had done. The earth accepted Habil but rejected the act that had taken his life. In that moment, Qabil realized that his punishment was not death, it was to live with what he had done. His guilt would follow him like a shadow, haunting every breath, every sunrise, every moment of rest. The whisper of shaitan that once fueled his anger now laughed in mockery, leaving him alone in the ruins of his own soul. He had become the first killer, the first man to bring death into existence, and the first to understand regret. From that day, mankind learned that sin does not end with the act, it continues to echo, generation after generation. For every unjust death that followed, a part of its weight would return to Qabil, the one who first opened that door. The earth, once pure, now carried the memory of blood, and humanity would never be the same again. Qabil left his home, wandering in exile, shunned by the peace he had once known. He could no longer look toward the heavens without feeling the sting of guilt. He tried to build, to grow, to forget, but nothing he did could cleanse the stain that burned within him. Every face reminded him of his brother. Every quiet night reminded him of the soundless fall of Habil's body. His heart, once filled with pride, was now a desert of sorrow. And thus, the story of mankind's first crime became the eternal lesson of envy, regret, and divine justice. For from that single act, humanity would forever understand that no sin begins with violence, it begins with a heart that forgets its creator. The world after Habil's death was not the same. The wind that once carried peace now whispered of sorrow, and the land that had once been pure carried the weight of the first sin. Adam and Hawa felt the loss like the breaking of the sky itself. A father had lost his son, but more than that, he had seen the seed of corruption sprout from his own bloodline. He who had been taught by the angels now looked upon the earth and saw what envy could do to the human heart. He cried not only for Habil but for every child of mankind who would one day follow the same path of pride, anger, and jealousy. For in that one moment, the destiny of humanity had been rewritten with tears and blood. The woman who had stood at the center of this storm lived in silence, her heart heavy with grief. She had not chosen to become the cause of division, nor had she sought the love that brought destruction. Yet fate had placed her in the middle of a divine test that revealed the frailty of men. She had seen two brothers, one consumed by envy and one crowned by righteousness, and through them she witnessed the thin line that separates devotion from destruction. She would carry this memory for the rest of her life, a constant reminder that beauty can be both a gift and a trial. People often think that tests come only through hardship, but sometimes they come through blessings, through love, wealth, or appearance, and only then is the true heart revealed. As the years passed, stories of Habil and Qabil were told to their descendants. Children gathered under the stars and asked, "Why did he kill his brother?" And the elders would answer, "Because he forgot Allah." That answer echoed through generations, because every sin after that could be traced back to forgetting the Creator. The woman who had once been desired became a symbol among them, a lesson that beauty without faith is a storm that can drown the soul. She was not cursed, but chosen, for through her Allah revealed one of the deepest truths of existence, that what is given to you as a blessing can destroy you if you do not hold it with humility. From her lineage came new generations who carried both the light of Habil and the shadow of Qabil. Some hearts were gentle and obedient, loving Allah with sincerity, while others carried arrogance and resentment. Humanity began to grow, to build, to wander, but always the story of the two brothers remained a tale that lived in the blood of every person born after them. When one man envied another, when greed turned brother against brother, when jealousy broke families apart, that ancient story was reborn in silence. It was never just a story of two men, it was the reflection of our own nature. Qabil lived in regret for the rest of his days. He became a wanderer, unable to find peace. Every sunrise reminded him of Habil's smile, and every night the darkness reminded him of his crime. He was haunted by the whisper that once promised victory but had delivered only emptiness. Shaitan had deceived him, but the greater betrayal came from within his own pride. He tried to build cities and surround himself with power, but even the tallest walls could not protect him from the echo of his guilt. He would often wake in terror, seeing his brother's lifeless eyes in every shadow. And so, he became a living reminder of what happens when a heart turns away from Allah's mercy. Through this tragedy, humanity learned the first and most painful law of the soul, that sin always begins with disobedience to the heart's conscience. Habil's story did not end with his death. His righteousness became a legacy. His patience, his surrender, his quiet devotion all became a pattern for the believers who came after him. Every prophet that followed carried a piece of Habil's spirit, the willingness to stand firm even when facing oppression, the refusal to fight evil with evil. And every tyrant, every oppressor, every jealous soul that rose in history carried the mark of Qabil, the spirit of envy and rebellion that leads mankind to destroy its own. This was not just a tale of the past. It was the first mirror held up to the human heart. It told us that power, beauty, and desire are fleeting, but sincerity and humility are eternal. It warned us that the smallest seed of jealousy can grow into the greatest act of evil if left unchecked. Habil's blood soaked into the earth, but his faith rose to the heavens. His death was not a loss, it was the first martyrdom in the name of truth. Allah accepted his soul, raising him in honor, while Qabil's name became a symbol of regret, of what happens when man allows his pride to blind his faith. The generations that followed built nations and kingdoms, discovered knowledge, and explored the earth, yet the same struggle continued. Fathers envied sons, neighbors envied neighbors, and rulers envied prophets. Every time jealousy grew, it led to destruction, just as it had in the beginning. The story of the two brothers was repeated again and again, only with different names and faces. And every time, mankind forgot the lesson that peace does not come from victory over others, but from victory over one's own soul. The woman who changed history eventually faded into silence, her story buried under time, but her legacy lived on. She had witnessed the rise and fall of love, the birth of envy, and the dawn of guilt. Through her, Allah taught the world that trials do not always come with storms. Sometimes they come in the form of something we desire the most. The lesson she left behind was this: every heart will be tested, not only by what it fears, but also by what it loves. And so, the generations after Habil and Qabil learned to speak of their story not with bitterness, but with awe. For it was through their pain that humanity learned the value of mercy, repentance, and forgiveness. From that time on, when people prayed, they remembered the two brothers. When they buried their dead, they remembered the crow sent by Allah. And when jealousy crept into their hearts, they remembered the warning written into the earth's first tragedy. The eternal lesson was clear: the greatest battles are not fought with swords, but within the soul. Envy, pride, and anger are the fires that destroy nations, while faith, humility, and patience are the waters that restore life. Habil's story reminds us that even when wronged, the believer holds his peace, trusting Allah's justice. And Qabil's fate warns that no sin ends with victory, because the one who harms another in arrogance only destroys himself. This story, the first tragedy written in human history, is more than a tale of two brothers. It is the blueprint of every human struggle. Within each of us, there is a Habil, the voice of humility, and a Qabil, the whisper of envy. Every day, they face each other in the battlefield of the heart. Every prayer, every choice, every word we speak decides which one will rise and which one will fall. Allah revealed their story not to entertain, but to awaken, to remind mankind that the heart's purity is worth more than any victory gained through pride. So remember, when you feel jealousy rising, when you feel wronged, when your pride begins to speak louder than your faith, think of Qabil and his endless regret. Think of Habil and his peace, even in death. Think of the woman who changed history, not through her choice, but through the divine plan that revealed the secrets of the human heart. And remember that Allah does not look at your wealth, your beauty, or your status. He looks only at your heart.